Hello and welcome to my video for EDAD 701 week 6, where this week we will be talking about continuing to build on that background knowledge, some information about what it means to be a educational leader. What are some of the things that we do in these leadership roles to help affect school-wide changes and lasting changes and impactful changes? And that'll be a lot of the main focus of our conversation here today. We'll also look at how our district develops and presents reports to the Board of Education, such as operating expenses, student results, academic profiles, and other information like that. And then we'll wrap up with some of our core text reflections, where we'll talk about, again, curriculum design, implementation, and how instructional leaders try to align curriculum within their schools. But starting with section 1, our background knowledge. For this week's topics, our first question is, do you agree with the notion that the principal is viewed and held to the standard for being the primary the primary agent of change? So when we look at schools and educational systems, we of course have our different tiers or levels within each school, starting with our educational leaders and admin teams, and then we have all of our teachers, social workers, psychologists, librarians, students themselves, any faculty and staff that work within the school. And then we also have our factors outside of the school building itself as well, with the district and the board, and the entire ecosystem of a school has a ton of different individuals, lots of different moving pieces, different conflicting and comparing thoughts at all times. So when we look at a school or a specific school building or a specific program, is the principal or the leader of that building the primary agent of change? And where I would stand on that is, I would say that the leader or the principal is the primary person to implement and sustain changes within a school building. If we have a directive to implement some new technology or new curriculum or implement changes within a building, a lot of the time those changes are going to also come from other administrative leaders, administrative teams, the school board, district mandates, state mandates, federal mandates. As educational leaders, we're going to be told all the time about these different changes or different approaches that, the people above us, so to speak, want to see implemented in our schools and within our students and teachers and classrooms. So while we may not always be at the forefront of what specific changes are going to be made, it does become our responsibility to implement them in the classroom and to make sure that those changes are going to be successful. They're going to have sustained success within our school building. So, that responsibility and that part does fall on us. The implementation of the programs. Are the programs working successfully? If not, how are we changing those programs? And how are we reporting the data and information to the board, to the state, and making sure that we are being held accountable and those changes are taking place? So as far as being the primary agent of change, overall, I would say yes, it is our responsibility to implement that change and then work with the rest of our school building and our other school leaders to make sure those changes, are successful. And that just kind of comes with the responsibility of being an educational leader. Uh, on the one hand, I look at it as, for myself, when I chose to go into educational administration and being a director of special education or being a director of curriculum and instruction, even before I made that decision, I knew there were going to be added responsibilities to my job and to my role if I someday took a position in leadership. And, teachers see that from their principals, from their current leaders. Behind the scenes, they're always communicating and working with others that we might not see at the face value. So when you go into an administrative role or leadership position, I think you always should expect that you're going to be held to a higher standard, or you're going to have to be the one to implement these changes in a school. Share with me evidence that you have that you have been witness to or engaged in as it relates to leadership skills and any school-wide effort for lasting change. Uh, I think the biggest thing that I have seen in recent years about um, seeing school-wide um, change or long-term approaches has really been technology in the classrooms. And that all started primarily when the pandemic hit and our school and a lot of schools across the country suddenly had to shift to remote learning. And technology was always present in the classroom beforehand. It's not as though it was non-existent and this is something that's completely new to us. Of course, we use technology for various purposes like interactive videos or labs of students, supplemental materials. But when we had to go to remote learning, it really became critical that teachers and students were fully engaged and aware of the technology that we use in schools and how can we integrate technology into the classroom and into a core part of the curriculum. And I've seen that as a lasting change in my location and my program at Chansley. And I've also seen that at other schools, which I have job shadowed at. I've job shadowed in the Rockford Public School District. I've job shadowed in schools here in Wisconsin, close to my home in Delavan. And when I've gone through each of these buildings, whether it's an elementary school or middle school or high school, one thing that I've always seen in common is students are engaged more actively in technology. Teachers are more actively engaged in technology, whether that's the use of laptops, use of online programs through Microsoft or through Google, whatever technology they're using. But I have seen that is in recent years the biggest change um, for teachers, students, and um, that technology shift or emphasis from a leadership standpoint is not always easy to implement. Um, Oftentimes we might see teachers who are uh, maybe stuck in their ways as far as how they approach something or design or implement their curriculum. And then all of a sudden we're asking for a sudden shift or a higher push into the technology aspects of our curriculum. And as an educational leader, it then becomes our responsibility to be aware of, how this technology is used, how it's sustained, and most importantly, how it's going to benefit our teachers and students as well. And we have to be aware of how to use these technologies and be aware of exactly how they benefit our students and our schools. Otherwise, if we can't show those benefits and we can't show the uses of this technology, we're going to have a very hard time of having our teachers buy into these practices. And I saw this a little bit as well in my own therapeutic day program when my director of special education was not always up to date on exactly how this technology benefited our teachers and our students, but more so they just knew that it was something we had to start using, had to start implementing. So it became hard to get buy-in from some of our teachers and some of our social workers and other supports in the building because they didn't see a strong, um, leadership role during that time. What impact did that have on you as an aspiring leader? So kind of going back to what I touched on there at the end, uh, the biggest impact I think it has on me as an aspiring leader is that, again, I always have to be aware of these new changes that are going to be taking place. If you look at education even 10 years ago and certainly 20, 30, 40 years ago, we see changes in our curriculum approach and design, the way we use technology, the way we use observations. Everything about schools changes all the time. And sometimes these changes happen very, very suddenly, and it feels like they happen overnight. And as an educational leader, it is going to be my responsibility to be able to adapt to and understand these changes rapidly, and also be able to get my staff to understand that what the values of these changes are, and again, how they're most importantly, how they're going to positively impact and benefit the teachers and students in the building. Now, of course, our students and their academic success is always at the forefront of everything we do in education. But at the same time, we do need to keep our teachers in mind, and we need to show teachers how these new changes are going to benefit them, almost as much as the students as well. Um, so when I become an educational leader, again, the biggest impact it had on me was just being able to adapt and quickly understand and be thorough in my knowledge of any changes that come into play, and be able to relay those changes to the rest of my team. And again, to show them how we're going to benefit from that in the short term and long term as well. Considering everything going on in the world of education, briefly share your vision for district communications and public relations. So district communications and public relations, especially in recent years, it's of course always been of the utmost importance. Schools and districts need to have um, a relationship with the families and the community that's going to benefit everyone in our school system. Our school system doesn't just stop in the school buildings or on school grounds. Our entire communities and the families of our students are part of our school, ecological system. And they're part of our environment, and they need to be included, in the decisions that we make. And we need to show how they're also going to benefit, how their students are going to benefit, how the community is going to benefit from the things we do in our schools. And again, with the increase in technology and just how easy it has become to talk to somebody, how to communicate something, those public relations are going to continue to be more and more and more important. And of course, if you go back even 20 years ago, finding out information about a school district or about a board meeting uh, was more difficult than it is today. Today, a lot of our school board meetings, if not all of them, are available for people to watch online, to have access to participate in. So the participation from the public into our school system now is easier than it ever has been, and it's going to continue to be easy, and maybe even become easier as the years go by. So um, as far as our communication with the public and our relationship with the public, it is going to be um, continuously important for us to have that positive relationship with them, and for them to understand that any information they might need, um, anything that's going on in the school, that we have an open door policy with them. They can find out whatever they need to find out. They can communicate with us whenever they need to, but we never want the public or our community to feel like they're being shut out or closed off to information within our district or in our schools. If we reach that point with the public and with the community, then at certain points we want to have particular changes, or if we're trying to implement something within our schools, it could be harder to do what we need to do as a school if we don't have the support of our community and of the public. So that kind of wraps up our background knowledge there. Section 2, we'll deal with some of the responsibilities and roles of the Director of Instruction with communication and public relations. So who in your district develops and presents annual monitoring reports for the Board of Education for things like operating expenses, student expectations, student results, academic performance. Um, so it's a little bit unique with myself and my current location, since we are a therapeutic day program who works and operates with multiple school districts in our area. We don't just report to like one school board or one school district. We have to communicate and cooperate with student or with districts um, that we are currently working with. So right now for the upcoming 2022-2023 school year, we currently are working with 3 different school districts. We have RPS, or the Rockford Public School District 205. We have the Dixon Public School District located in Illinois. And we also have the Harlem School District, which is also located in the Rockford area of Illinois. But we have to communicate information with all 3 of those districts, and then we also communicate our information directly to the Illinois State Board, or the ISBE. And we work with all those different districts, all those different people, where we share things like our student results, student academic performance, student expectations, operating expenses, things like that. So operating expenses would be things like the cost of each student to attend our therapeutic day program on a per day basis. I believe last year that number was $257 per school day, at least for the state of Illinois. I'm not sure what that number is in Wisconsin. But things like student success, academic performance. Um, Last year, I was actually in charge of that operation. And how that was done was I created an Excel spreadsheet where I had an Excel spreadsheet for each of our partnering school districts. So for RPS, the Rockford Public School District, for example, on their Excel spreadsheet, I would list all the students that they have referred to us. And I would list what classes they were in, what their grades were in each class, what their attendance was for each week, if they had any behavioral issues. And I would update that information every week. And on every Friday, I would send that information to the representative or liaison from RPS. Now do the same thing for Dixon and the Harlem School District as well. So that responsibility as far as relaying our student information, again, academics, behavior, attendance, falls on the director of special education, and they talk to the partnering districts. And there's also, of course, 1,000 emails throughout the week where they are asking maybe more specific pieces of information. If there's a student who has to have an out of school suspension, for example, that is a separate report entirely that gets filled out and filed with our partnering district, and we keep a record of that for ourselves as well. And then usually at the end of the year, ISBE, the Illinois State Board of Education, will ask for a more comprehensive report of all of our students' progress and information throughout the year. So we keep information and records of everything that we do in the school, and we share that with the partnering districts, and we share that with the Illinois State Board of Education. Excuse me, but that's just a a daily process and something that we communicate every single day, where official reports are sent out at every Friday. And then attendance as well is sent out on a once per month basis to our schools, where we send them using the example of RPS again, at the end of every month, we'll send them a comprehensive list, of the attendance for their students in our program. What days they missed, what their attendance percentage was their attendance excused, unexcused, other information such as that. Who in your district coordinates and oversees culture and climate evaluations with all stakeholders? So when we are working with our evaluations and working with the stakeholders and the public, that process falls more so. There is some of that responsibility on the director of special education in our program, but a higher percentage of that responsibility then falls on our regional director of student services, where they work more with our stakeholders. They work more of the public relations side, and they relay different information, about our school, about our culture, and the evaluations that have taken place in our school building as well. So, um, last year, as I did my internship for director of special education, this is not a particular area that I had a ton of time in. I did meet with our regional director. Stephanie Walters is her name. And I spoke with her and I worked a little bit with her. But generally, she just gets pieces of information from the director of each program. And then she uses that as a master copy. And then she really handles, um, the higher responsibilities, more specifically in regard to things like that. What excites you about any of these roles or what worries you, excuse me, about any of these roles, as you potentially take the reins? Um, I think the biggest, I don't know if I want to use the term worry, but just making sure that all the information is accurate and up to date as well. In any school and especially in special education, it is, critically important that any information we have, any files we have are 100% accurate. There is no missing data. There is not faulty data. There is not information that's left in a gray area or information that is in violation of special education or school rules and laws. So just making sure that we are following the processes for, filing and sending and receiving our student academic success, our performances, making sure that we are following the right protocols and the right rules and laws, and that all the staff in my building as well, understand the importance of why things need to be accurate, why things have to be in order. I know sometimes when talking with staff, you hear conversations of, well, maybe this or that area isn't so important. Maybe we can just do this or that here. And I want to make sure that all the staff in my building and the staff that I work with understand that we can't just take the easy approach or the simple way here or there. Sometimes some of the processes are a bit tedious, they are a bit annoying, but we have to understand that they are there to not only protect our students, but also to protect us as well, and to keep our job safe, and to keep our students safe as well. So our next section here, we will look at our supplemental research for the week. Identify the role of the principal as the primary agent of change. So we did talk about this a little bit in our background knowledge and how we view the educational leader, as the primary agent of change. And we have an article here from Karen Acton on school leaders as change agents. Do principals have the tools that they need? And excuse me, there is a lot of information in this reading here, but there is a particular section here that stood out to me that I would like to read. I will pull up my screen so you can see that as well. But if we're looking at principals or educational leaders as the agents of change, this is what stood out to me here in these couple sections. Despite little formal professional learning in the change process, most principals in this study felt they knew how to implement new initiatives. Over the course of their careers, they felt they had gained increased self-confidence and experience in undertaking numerous new mandates. While confidence and knowledge are important traits for leaders, the professional growth of the principals in the study did not include specific learning on the formal methodology of implementing change. While the study used Hall and Hord's 2015 change theory as framework, their model is similar to other change processes in the literature. It was clear that principals were more familiar with certain steps to promote change than others. For example, Principal D'Angelo was comfortable creating a shared vision. When we began working on launching a new inquiry-based learning strategy, I sat down with my instructional team And together, we came up with a messaging of why this was important for student learning. We explored this further with the rest of the teachers at the next staff meeting, as we knew it was important for everyone to have a say. Second and third steps in the change process, providing resources and professional development, were also well understood. Supports are frequently provided to teachers in the form of articles, textbooks, manipulatives, technology, and in-services. However, when participants were asked about their understanding of the subsequent steps in the change process, it was apparent there were gaps in their knowledge. For example, Principal Nowak described the change process as look at data, make a plan, implement the plan, and review it again. When probing deeper, it became apparent that Nowak was missing an understanding of some of the key factors necessary to implement the plan, such as differentiated strategies on how to effectively check on progress and provide individual, targeted, ongoing assistance. So when we are looking at educational leaders as the primary agents of change, this is what stood out to me here. As it is mentioned in the article, a lot of principals know the basic processes or steps. We do A, B, C, and then we review it, and we do A, B, C, and we review it, we do it again and again. However, we need to know how to effectively check on progress, and again, provide individual, targeted, ongoing assistance. So when we are implementing these changes into our schools and into our classrooms and with our teachers and our students, when we want these changes to happen, we don't just give the materials to the teachers and show them a few data points and say, well, this is how it benefits the students and this is why it's important. So go ahead and implement it, and then we'll review the data and we'll go on from there. The leaders do need to be involved in checking in on the progress, daily progress, weekly progress of how the implementation is going. And again, providing those differentiated strategies, whether that's individual supports, targeted supports, or just providing ongoing assistance. So when we implement these changes, again, we don't just want to stick our teachers with this new information, tell them to review it, implement it, and then we'll look at the data afterwards. We need to be involved in the daily processes of this information in order to ensure that it is being done successfully and that it is actually supporting our teachers and students in our classrooms. Understand the importance of leadership in any school-wide effort for lasting change. So when we want to, implement lasting change in our schools, we also have our second article here, which I want to point out a couple paragraphs here. If school principals focus more of their influence on improving the quality of teaching and learning in their school, then they're likely to have a far greater influence on student outcomes. Denham observed that an explicit focus on teaching and learning was widespread amongst schools where exceptional student outcomes are found. Principals' leadership is a critical factor in creating and maintaining an environment in which teachers could teach, students could learn, and exceptional outcomes could occur. Teacher quality is a key focus in instructional leadership, and this model appears to be better aligned with this research. Indeed, transformational leadership has been criticized for not having adequate emphasis on education. So through these last couple weeks here, one key statement that has stood out to me that I've seen in numerous places has been, besides the teacher, the educational leaders, whether that's a program director, a principal, assistant principal, but educational leaders, besides the teacher, have the highest impact on student outcomes and of student learning. So, recognizing that as educational leaders, even though we might not be in the classroom all the time, teaching the lessons, grading the assignments, conducting the assessments with students, that doesn't mean that we aren't having an influence and an impact on those classrooms and on those teachers and on those students. Now, we need to remember and be aware that we are still heavily impacting what's going on in the classrooms, and we are having an impact on those student outcomes. So, providing supports to our teachers, providing supports to our students, but being involved in the teaching and learning process within our schools and within our classrooms is still a part of our jobs, even though we might not be working in the classroom, on a daily basis. And critique the need for district communication and public relations. Uh, so one thing that stood out to me in the about public relations and communication was the study that we have here from Adil Korak, in which they interviewed a handful of administrative leaders here, which I will pull up. Some from primary school, secondary schools or middle schools, and then also general and vocational high schools as well. So I believe there were 13, 13 of these participants interviewed, a mixture of male and female educational leaders. One thing that stood out to me right away, though, in looking at just some of this basic information is were any public relation courses taken, and we see that we have 3, 4, 5 of these educational leaders who said no to this particular question. So, right away, that stands out to me as a little bit of a concern. The public relations require specialization. Most of them with the answer of yes, but also a couple with partially. So, we have some of these educational leaders who never had to take a public relations course, and then the public relations did not always require specialization either. So just some background information there. But what really stood out to me about the themes here and the things that they looked at were when they, excuse me, I need to find the right section here. When they then asked them to express what comes to mind in table 2 here. What comes to mind in relation to the public relations process in the school? So, when they talk about public relations and the processes they have with their community, what comes to their mind? 4 of them had communication and cooperation. 4 of them had meeting the expectations of the school and its stakeholders. 2 of them had the institution's self-introduction and self-narration. 2 of them had empathy, and 1 of them had to atone. Interesting to me that to atone even popped up there as one of the first expressions that comes to mind about public relations. I think when we were talking about public relations, and as we mentioned and talked about a little bit earlier as well, I would align myself more so with these first couple responses here: communication and cooperation. Again, making sure that the public and the community are aware of where to find information. They're involved in the processes of our school and the changes in our school, and they know the school district and our school leaders are cooperating with them and are trying to work with them. And also, again, meeting the expectations of the school and its stakeholders. The public and the community, they are the stakeholders of our school, and they have expectations for our school, just like our teachers and our other administrative leaders do as well. So when we talk about public relations and the importance of them, I believe our primary focus, should align with these couple thoughts here. Again, just honest and open communication with the public, and then meeting the expectations of the school and our stakeholders. And for our core text reflections this week, share with me what you have learned about supervising the curriculum as it relates to the materials and those teaching it. And this will come from our textbook this week, where the first thing that stood out to me about in relation to number one, supervising the curriculum as it relates to the materials, is educational leaders, principals, directors. We need to be aware of the materials that are being used in our classrooms. And how do we do that? I think the best way, and what stood out to me the most, were these informal observations, sometimes also called walkthroughs. Informal observations are brief, unannounced classroom visits lasting from perhaps 5 to 15 minutes. Some term these informal visits walkthroughs, and some experts in the corporate world call such informal observations management by walking around. To make accurate decisions based on short observations in the walkthrough, principals should ask 6 questions, which are proposed in this table here. Are teachers using research-based teaching strategies? It is important to look for teachers' use of instructional strategies. No single right way to teach exists, but great teachers use a myriad of teaching strategies, understand the instructional purposes of each, and use each strategy intentionally. Do students' grouping patterns support learning? Cooperative learning is one of the 9 categories of effective instruction and classroom instruction that works. It includes supporting student learning using large groups, small groups, pairs, cooperative groups, or working individually. Determining whether teachers are intentional in their use of grouping patterns is key. So are teachers using these different learning approaches, whether they're small groups, large groups, or individual work time, for a reason and for a purpose? Do they have a vision in mind? Or, are teachers just picking random things to do? Today's Monday, so we're going to do individual work. Today's Wednesday, so we're going to do small group work today. Does it align with the instruction and with the curriculum? Is there a purpose for that? Are teachers and students using technology to support student learning? Educational technology is more prevalent in today's classrooms, but many teachers still do not put these tools to their best use. During walkthroughs, principals should note that the technology being used and how it is being used. So we also mentioned technology early in our discussion as well, but just keeping aware of, are we using some of these technology components that we have, and some of these, resources that we have now, effectively and efficiently in our classrooms? Do students understand their goals for learning? While conducting a walkthrough, principals should go beyond conducting a checklist of teacher practices. They also should observe what students are doing and learning. Are students able to explain what they are doing in terms of their learning goals? Are students involved in true learning objectives, or are they just focused on activities? Over time, student responses will tell how well teachers are communicating these goals and whether students are engaged and deliberate about their own learning. The best thing I've ever heard, or one of the best things I've ever heard about this question right here, is when we are in the classroom performing observations or walkthroughs, we need to go in there and, again, as it mentions, not go in at the checklist and just see, is teacher doing A, B, C, and D? We need to look at it as, if I was a student in this classroom, would I know what I'm supposed to be learning? Would I know what my learning objectives are today? What would be my prior knowledge before this lesson? And what should I expect to know by the end of today's work? But we need to go in there thinking about ourselves as a student in the classroom, learning from the teacher, because that is one of the best ways in which we can effectively use an observation or a walkthrough. Are students learning both basic and high order levels of knowledge? Classroom observation also should reveal if students are learning at the lower runs of Bloom's taxonomy or at the higher levels. All of these forms are necessary and appropriate in different contexts. If the majority of students' learning, however, is focused on lower level learning, Principals should have conversations with teachers about the levels of student learning they observed. So when we're in the classrooms, we don't just want to see that our students are just memorizing facts or different points of data and just spitting them back out or circling multiple choice questions all the time, on their worksheets or in their work. Does that mean that, those particular pieces of information or that type of learning has no value in the schools? No, of course not. But, that would be considered a lower level learning. We still want to have those critical thinking and critical reflections from our students and make sure that we see a mix of those two approaches. And do student achievement data correlate with walkthrough data? Principals should also view classroom through the lens of student achievement data. When principals conduct their classroom observations within the context of student achievement data, they can dramatically increase the acuity of their observations and discover ways to improve teaching and learning. So again, using that student achievement data that we see in the classrooms, and then using that to determine, how we're going to improve the teaching and learning within our classrooms. But, through the use of these, informal walkthroughs, um, the more engaged we are in the classrooms, I think the more knowledge we gain of the day-to-day operations in the room. When we have educational leaders who might do a formal walkthrough or formal observation once a semester or even once a school year, as an educational leader, you're really not able to understand, the hows and the whys of the classroom. So when we look at that data at the end of the year and we see certain trends, whether positive or negative, if we're only in the classroom once or twice a year, we're not truly understanding why there are certain trends, why there's improvement, or why there's decline. So we need to be involved in those processes, not every single day, but on a consistent enough basis so we understand the how and why things are happening in the rooms. What resonated with you regarding curriculum development and then implementation? So with curriculum development and implementation, we see that in chapter 10 of our text this week. And the part that stood out to me the most, and we have talked about this as well in previous weeks, is the committee or the curriculum team, the committee structure, in regards to curriculum design, implementation, and creation. To develop a scope and sequence, program goals, objectives, learning outcomes, and authentic tasks for any school program, a subject area writing committee must be established. The steps for structuring the committee, along its responsibilities, follow. And we don't necessarily need to go through all the different steps here, but as we have talked about in previous weeks, when we are designing and implementing curriculum and working with curriculum in our schools, it's important for us to remember that, we're not always going to have all the answers, and we need the help and support of everyone around us in order to successfully, implement the curriculum in such a way that is going to benefit our students, and our teachers and our entire school building. And we want to make sure that our curriculum is also designed in a way that's going to have short-term benefits and long-term benefits for our students as well, and also that it meets those horizontal and vertical learning goals and learning achievements as well. But we need this learning committee. We need the committee that's composed of teachers in the school, other administrative leaders, but people with experience. We cannot do this all on our own. We need our committee, and we need our committee of people who are working in the program. So, just a quick, a refresher or example of the committee again. It must be made up of teachers representing all grade levels, K through 12, preferably 2 staff members from each grade grouping, primary, intermediate, middle level or junior high, and high school. In smaller school districts, 1 teacher per 3 grades or course level is satisfactory, as long as there is feedback from those teaching the other grade or course levels. The building principal or designee from elementary, middle level, and senior high school must chair or at least be represented on the committee. The school district curriculum director or designee should serve as chairperson and be responsible for organizing and directing the activities of the writing committee. And the school board of education must be apprised of the process used to write curricula by the board curriculum committee. So that's just a quick overview of kind of what the committee itself is going to look like. But we can see that it is composed of a variety of individuals from each grade level, from each different building in our district, because that is the best way in order to make sure, again, that we meet that vertical and horizontal learning goals. How should an instructional leader align curriculum? So when we are aligning curriculum, we see that primarily here in chapter 11 of our text. And this is going to refer a lot to also some information that we have talked about in the past. But when we are aligning curriculum, the big thing that we're always going to come back to, are the state and primary standards. So when we have developed and we have designed curriculum and we're continuing to revise it and implement it, we have to make sure that when we align our curriculum, we are aligning it with a purpose. We can't just pick or choose random or vague blueprints. We have to have a clear and a concise idea of what our curriculum aligns with. And the best way to do that is, again, with those state standards and making sure the state standards are going to show us what students are expected to know across all grade levels, what they're expected to know going into a lesson, and what they're expected to know at the end of a lesson as well. What should you always consider when conducting teaching evaluations from a curriculum lens? This one was one of the more interesting questions to me, because I'm thinking about it in terms of the curriculum lens. But when we are conducting evaluations, this leadership and evaluation portion of chapter 12 really stood out to me here. A major factor in any evaluation process is quality of leadership. One of the most important aspects of that leadership role is for educational planners to understand the process of evaluation and how it should be administered. Creating this level of evaluation process means leaders will have to convey knowledge of curriculum as well as instructional strategies. For that reason, school leaders must become adept at obtaining teacher buy-in, as well as conveying expectations of how teaching and learning can be enhanced via the curriculum. There is a special need for leadership and more understanding as to the process of evaluation and how it relates to the development of effective curriculum. The key term to me that cuts off on these 2 pages was the teacher buy-in. We want to make sure that as educational leaders, it is our job as well, not only to make sure that the curriculum used in our classrooms and in our schools is effective for student learning and growth and achievement, but also that our curriculum is also accepted and embraced by the teachers in our school buildings as well. Teacher buy-in is probably going to be one of the more difficult components that we come across, because every teacher has their own idea on what the curriculum should be, or if the curriculum that we are currently using is effective, or something that they think should be used in our schools. You're going to have some teachers that love the curriculum and support it, And you're going to have other teachers who think there are flaws within the curriculum. And it's our job as the educational leader to have a cohesive and a unified teacher team in our building. Um, the more that we have a unified and shared vision of our curriculum, the easier it's going to be to allow teachers to buy in. And we do that as leaders, by addressing the concerns and questions others might have about our curriculum. I think it's important for us to remember that, not every single teacher is going to immediately buy into the curriculum, and that is okay. Um, but we need to show them the hows and the whys and the benefits of our curriculum. And again, as I mentioned earlier, not only how it's going to benefit the students and the learners in their classrooms, but also how it's going to benefit them as teachers as well. And we can do this through various methods, professional development, some trainings, teacher mentors, um, using collaboration between our teachers, social workers, and school psychologists and other specialists in our building. But I think the more we build a unified and a team vision and team common goal, um, easier or more likely it will be to have that buy-in in place. And then when we get everybody to buy in and we have that shared vision of our curriculum and of our learning, the more effectively it is going to be used in our classrooms. And then the more effectively our students are going to have higher levels of growth and achievement. So that wraps up our discussion here for week 6. As always, if there are any questions, concerns, anything else I can address, please feel free to reach out. Thank you for watching.